New videos every day.
Hi, I'm Anna Miller, founder and CEO of the Depression Project, and today Creel and I are going to have a conversation about rethinking depression. Carol, let's hear a little bit about who you are before we jump into this conversation.
Thank you, Anna. I'm Creel. I am owner of LifeWorks Marketing. I'm an empowerment coach and facilitator focusing on forgiveness and the law of attraction. I'm a grassroots supporter of natural alternative health for 20-some years now, and I'm very happy to be here.
Really glad to have you. Well, Carol, I'm so happy to also have you on the board of the Depression Project as the VP of Forgiveness, so thank you for taking that role. Let's talk a little bit about what we mean by rethinking depression. What do you think would be a good place for us to start that conversation?
Well, a lot of people might think about why should we rethink it? So why should we rethink it?
That's a very good question. Well, what we're doing right now isn't working. And a really good way to see that things aren't working is to look at the statistics that are going on. 1 in 4 people are diagnosed with a depressive disorder, one of the big 3, depression, bipolar, or anxiety. Some of the statistics show that about 15% of people in a population at any given time are in need of help from depression. So the direction that we've been going doesn't seem to be working. So perhaps if we had an opportunity to rethink it, maybe we could produce a different result.
Doesn't that sound like a fantastic idea?
Yeah.
And so how would we, what would be one of the first things that we might want to rethink? I know there's a lot of myths about depression. Can you tell me a little bit about that and some of those myths?
Absolutely. I mean, this fundamentally is the work of the Depression Project. We have a mission where we're going to liberate the world from depression, one person at a time, by focusing on what works. So if we talk about what works, really what we're talking about is a couple of things. We're talking about improving the well-being that people experience in their everyday life, and we're also talking about life-enhancing beliefs and behaviors. So back to your question more directly, Carol. There are a few myths that are pretty common in the way that we look and talk about and go about treating depression. The first one let's touch upon is that depression is caused by a chemical imbalance in the brain. You've heard that a million times, I'm sure.
Is there any real significant research that substantiates that?
Actually, no.
So
there's a couple of ways we can look at that. Of course, as a biological being, there's obviously chemical interactions going on in the body all of the time. So at one level, yes, there are chemical reactions happening. However, in the mental health industry, talking about the chemical imbalance in the brain as being the reason why one should seek out medication, it's something that's been coined and doesn't really have much substance in terms of studies that have been put behind that. It's a pretty interesting thing to think about is, what would it mean if that's not true?
Well, don't you think that from that myth and how many people in this planet are believing that there's a chemical imbalance, what would that do to our society if we rethought that, and what might that rethought thinking look like?
Well, we can certainly look at it from the point of view of where I started my own journey. As you know, I wrote the book Madness, Mania, and Miracles, which is my journey through bipolar and to recovery. That the place I started was what I call Think Myself Well. So I started with the premise that let's just say for a moment that the chemical imbalance idea is true. Just for a moment, what do I have that's within my control? There's something I can do about. And there were some things that came up for me. I can look at my environment in a few different ways. How do I support and nurture myself spiritually? Mm-hmm. How do I support and nurture my thoughts and emotions? And how do I support and nurture this physical body too? So looking at the environment on 3 levels.
I think that is fantastic.
Yeah. So that in terms of where we can go in changing a limiting belief, like it's a chemical imbalance, meaning it's outside of your control and you're at the whim of the chemicals that are going on, we can begin to look at what we can do for ourselves and how we can begin to take care of ourselves, just as an opportunity to create something else in terms of a life-enhancing belief.
Well, a lot of what I do is empower the individual in my coaching. And so once we leave victim land of thinking that we're the victim and we become empowered, then a whole new world opens up to us. And there are very specific little tools that we can do that. And one of them is to make a choice to rethink in a different way. It's just not, we're so programmed, those programs and patterns run so deeply within us that to change those sometimes takes an awareness of the thinking of the old pattern to make that shift in consciousness. And isn't that what we're talking about, is shifting consciousness here?
It absolutely is, and the research, if you look at it, that they have now determined that our subconscious mind is really running the show. It's not really the conscious mind. So the 5% that we're aware of, there's 95% of things going on below the surface. So if that's the case, the question is what can someone do to gain access and begin doing something different about those things that are underlying and causing them? Because I certainly wouldn't have created the experience I had in my life if I'd have known what to do about it at the time.
But let me ask you a question. By having that experience, what kind of a profound, and it's very obvious because you've written this wonderful book, that has caused you to, like, this is one of the things that I teach in my classes and my workshops and my coaching, is that making that shift and going back to where that pain was, or that thing that happened that you thought was so terrible to you, is what positive things or what gifts out of it has it come. One of the gifts for you is to write this book and to begin to rethink and see a different way of maybe that experience that you were having was for your higher good in some form.
Really beautifully said. I much of the crux of what we're talking about today is if we choose to rethink depression, then perhaps we might choose to look at depression differently than we have thought about it before and say, perhaps this is the beginning of something, perhaps this is a gift. And I'm very aware that when you're in the experience of depression, having that sensation of gift is not really what's going on for you, having been there and lived that very, very personally myself. And it's the beginning of a journey to get out of your life what's not working and start looking at some new things that you might want to construct and put in there that could start working for you. It's a really great place. For me, I believe that the biggest part of the problem, why depression, why is it so rampant, why has it become an epidemic, why is all of that going on, is the depression itself is not the problem. It's how we look at and deal with it that's the problem.
Exactly. And accepting those myths and accepting those beliefs that we've got, those underlying beliefs, just perpetuate more of that depression. So if we're willing to open to a new way of thinking, it very possibly could change our whole world, our whole lifestyle, the way that we look at our world.
Absolutely.
And that sounds very exciting to me.
Yeah. It's very, very exciting. Let's look at another myth. We have a few more minutes here, Carol, and you can go to thedepressionproject.com and read more about this topic and find out more about what we're doing with it. But here's another myth for you, is that it's in my genes, it runs in my family, it goes back generations. My great-great-grandmother was institutionalized for mental health problems. Wow, if we take on that belief, which, by the way, is not true, how limiting is that?
Well, science has now showed us how, and with quantum physics, that we are continually renewing ourselves. Our cells are dropping off. We are recreating our new organs within us. And so that changing physically goes to show that we can, if we consciously then change our mind or rethink or look at our world in a different way, or our concepts or our old belief systems. Our old belief systems are beginning to drop away with the new thinking that's going on a global world. And with the drug companies now being so exposed for the side effects of all the drugs that are happening to us, and giving these drugs to all of our children, that even the swine flu, CNN did a report that's actually did a poll saying that 55% of the Americans today refuse to take that flu shot. So if we could change that by just taking a look and seeing and researching for ourselves and doing that information for ourselves, what a difference that could make in our world.
Yeah. The other science to look at is epigenetics, which thanks to Bruce Lipton, who's a pioneer in the field of biology and teaching us about what's already in our bodies to help us get a blueprint for how we can get well, that's really the piece that's blowing out of the water this concept that our genes are controlling our destiny. Yes. They're not. I'm going to go back to the point I made earlier. Guess what's in control? How we're interacting with our environment. It's all environment.
Also, I want to add something, Anna, that in my private sessions with my clients is that most people forget that they have a choice. And that is huge because we get so into thinking that our life is the way it is. Life is a random set of circumstances and that we are just victims to life. But that the actual truth is that we have choices, that we can make choices to look and see and be in a different way.
Absolutely. So as we wrap up this little introduction to Rethinking Depression, a question I have is if you're interested in beginning to explore and examine and start to rethink, what kinds of things can we suggest to the viewer of this, places that they might start to do that?
Well, they might read your book, for one thing.
Yeah.
They might go to my website to see about forgiveness, which is www.lifeworksmarketing.com. There are tools out there, many tools that are self-help things. They could also start doing their own research. And I'm sure that you have some other things to add to that they might start doing.
Yeah, it really, to begin rethinking, starts with making a choice to decide that you want to have a different experience. And from there, the science is out. We are co-creating this experience. No matter where you're at in your understanding of that, the science is out there to support that that's really what's going on. So that means that we have the opportunity to reshape our thinking so that it's more life-enhancing and supports our well-being. That is the work of the Depression Project. You can log on at www.thedepressionproject.com. Join the community and follow this work, and together we will liberate the world from depression. Thank you so much, Carol.
Thank you, Anna.
If you liked this video, we have hundreds of more alternative videos ranging from sexual health to psychology to mind control. So if you liked it, go ahead and click on me to enter the Psychetruth channel.